पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर् द्यौः शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Sarvastaratu durgani sarvo bhadrani pashyatu. Sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Maheti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So we'll continue our study of the main paper that Swamiji presented at the Chicago Parliament. Last week, we saw that portion where Swamiji discussed about the Vedas, what the Vedas stand for, how they are more than simply a bunch of books, the true significance of Vedas. Although it was mentioned very briefly, we had opportunity last week to discuss it in some detail. After discussing the Vedas, now Swamiji next moves on to speak about those great souls who intuited these Vedic mantras. And that is what he discusses. That's on page 10, second para. The discoverers of these laws are called rishis, and we honor them as perfected beings. I'm glad to tell this audience that some of the very greatest of them were women. The rishis are also sometimes called the mantra drashta. That is, these contents of the Vedas were not thought out by them intellectually. They actually saw them. The mantras in the Vedas, they saw them, obviously not with these eyes, and it's a mystical perception. In deep meditation, they actually saw, and many mystics have recorded that sometimes the mantras appear in golden letters. So we read about these descriptions. So the rishis are sometimes called the mantra drashta, those who saw the Vedic mantras in mystical visions. And only those who have completely purified themselves can have that kind of perception. And therefore, Swamiji says that we honor these rishis as perfected beings. It's also significant that this talk, which was given now more than almost 127 years ago or so, that Swamiji specifically mentioned that some of the greatest of these rishis were women. And you can see it's not difficult to know that even 127 years ago, the society had already become male-dominated. And so the inequality, the gender inequality, has been around for quite some time. So it's not a very modern phenomenon. On the contrary, it might seem as if, although the gender inequality still exists, it's probably, again, one never knows, this can't be measured, but it might seem that at least in some parts of the world, that gender inequality has become at least a little bit less than what it probably was 100 years ago or 200 years ago. But the fact that Swamiji specifically mentions that some of the greatest of these Vedic rishis were women, Swamiji is making a point that this gender inequality, which seems to be a reality in the kind of world in which we live, that did not exist in the Vedic period. That there was no distinction in the rishis between a man and a woman. In fact, in some of the Upanishads, especially the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there are these very scholarly intellectual debates between these great enlightened ones including some women and men. The women, many of them in those days were called Brahmavadinis. So the names that we read in the books are Gargi, Maitreyi, and so on. In fact, the Vedic education was open to all, irrespective of gender. It was only after the incursions from across the border began, just before the Mughal rule was established in India. So that was that time, and we probably have spoken about this before, that anytime there is a military aggression and foreign troops and invaders occupy a land, oftentimes the significant casualties of war, the targets are women and children. And so there is the natural instinct of a community that whenever there is an aggression and there is an invasion, to protect the women and children first. And partly as a result of that, that women in India, they sometimes call the parda system, that the women went into the inner apartment, so to speak. And that was because to protect them from strangers when your land is occupied by foreign occupiers. And so then it became very difficult for young girls to be sent out to the teacher's home as they were being done in the Vedic period. And when some kind of a emergency situation arises and a society or a community responds to it in some way, if that contingency is for a very limited time, then there is a chance that things might return to normalcy before. But if something continues for decades and centuries, then that becomes the new normal, that becomes the new default situation. And that's really what has happened. So the Swamiji, by this statement, is pointing out that the inequality that we see today was not there in the Vedic period. Here it may be said that these laws, as laws may be without end, but they must have had a beginning. The Vedas teach us that creation is without beginning or end. Science is said to have proved that the sum total of cosmic energy is always the same. Then, if there was a time when nothing existed, where was all this manifested energy? Some say it was in a potential form in God. In that case, God is sometimes potential and sometimes kinetic, which would make him mutable. Everything mutable is a compound, and everything compound must undergo that change which is called destruction. So God would die, which is absurd. Therefore, there never was a time when there was no creation. So after speaking about the rishis, Swamiji next takes up the topic of creation. It seems natural that when people started asking questions about life, that the questions would be about the world around us. Because we naturally look out, and when we look at things, people, questions come to mind. And so it seems reasonable that at some time people looked out and said, where did all this world come from? And the different theories of creation of the world that have come down to us are a response to that question in the human heart, where this world came from. Now the word creation, although we use it as a common word in the English language, theologically, in theology, when the word creation is used, it has a very specific meaning. And creation, in the theological sense, specifically means something coming out of nothing. And therefore, understood in that way, only God can create. None of us can create. We human beings can manufacture goods. And manufacturing goods are, although we might use the word creation, what we are really doing is we are taking a bunch of raw material or parts, putting them together in some form, and that's our final product. The parts themselves may have been made by someone, but then you ultimately, if you just go back, you have to stop somewhere. Well, we didn't manufacture the atoms and molecules which form the parts, which eventually form the product. So when human beings, when we produce something, we always have a raw material for it. Without raw material, we cannot bring something out of nothing. And therefore, the word creation cannot strictly be employed there. We can say we are manufacturing something, or we are producing something, but not creating it. And the word creation in this special sense can only apply to what God can do, because this creation must have had beginning sometime. So before the creation started, there was no creation. And now that this creation is there, all this material world that we see, from where did this raw material for this material universe come? And the answer is, well, there was nothing. So God produced this material universe out of nothing. So from nothing, something has emerged. And that is why it is called creation. Now Swamiji is questioning that kind of thinking. And he's using the terminology of the physics that was used in the times that he was there. So that is, we speak about the law of conservation of energy and law of conservation of matter. And so I don't know about E equal to mc squared. It probably wasn't available in that form of an equation then, but the idea probably was around. It may not have been mathematically put together. In fact, in one of Swami Vivekananda's lectures, I think in Dhyana Yoga probably, he says that he's not using any technical language there. He says even a cobweb moved at infinite speed can cut through an oak tree. So the idea about the interrelationship between matter, force, and energy, and all of that, these ideas were around, and it took some time before they were put into a form of an equation. In any case, what Swamiji is saying is that all this energy that we see in the world today, if there was a time when this universe didn't exist, where was all this energy? And by the law of conservation of energy, you can't destroy energy. You can only change from one form to another. And then one way of saying is, well, it was in some form in God. It was a part of God. So since God did not have any raw material to make this world, God created this world. God produced the raw material out of himself or herself, depending on you see God as a masculine or a feminine. The problem with that kind of thinking is, and although Swamiji is using the word potential and kinetic here, the idea is if this universe has come out of God, then God as God is now is that original God minus the universe. I mean, so God is not fully a God yet, because God has now kind of gotten divided between this. Some material out of God has come and formed this universe. The problem with that kind of thinking is that makes God mutable. That if something can come out of God, the God that is there now is God minus the universe. And so if things can disintegrate from God's being, and that's essentially what death is. I mean, what is death? That this thing that seems so whole now, when the parts that constitute this body start disintegrating, which is what really returning to ashes or returning to dust means, then that is death. So if God is less than a God somehow after the creation of this universe, which would make God mutable, and therefore God is mortal. But, well, that's absurd. And so the idea that something could come out of nothing would not make sense if we look at it from our understanding of science. And so Swamiji presents an alternative in the next para. If I may be allowed to use a simile, creation and creator are two lines without beginning and without end, running parallel to each other. God is the ever-active providence by whose power systems after systems are being evolved out of chaos, made to run for a time, and again destroyed. This is what the Brahmin boy repeats every day. The sun and the moon, the Lord created like the sun and moon of previous cycles. And this agrees with modern science. The quotation here in Sanskrit goes, Surya Chandramasau Dhatha Yatha Purvam Akalpayan. So what Swamiji is saying is this universe and creation and the creator, they never had a beginning, and if they didn't have a beginning, they will not have an end. So they are two parallel lines and they coexist. The second thing he points out is that systems after systems are being evolved out of chaos. So creation, therefore, is seen in the Hindu theory about the universe is not as a one-time event, that at some point God created this. It is seen as a repetitive event, that the universe remains in a potential form. There is this material, and then it manifests, comes out again, and then it returns back in that seed form, and again comes out. It's a little bit like the biological cycle, you might say. The tree, you plant a seed, out of which then a plant comes, a seed comes, which grows flowers, fruits. From those fruits, the seed comes again, and you have more trees. So it's a continuous cycle. And this agrees with modern science. But remember, this modern science is a science that was there 125 years ago. And many of you who have better science background may be able to reflect a little bit more deeply on this. The other day I was reading, even those who hold the Big Bang theory, there is an idea that even the Big Bang was not a one-time event. That just as that, I think, please forgive me if I get the terms are not very accurate, but there is some term called singularity. And so it's possible that this great expansion came from that small little, the Big Bang was not really so much of a bang, but it's kind of a very sudden expansion within the first, very short time, in a matter of seconds. And then the idea is that at some point, this apparently ever expanding universe is again going to collapse at some point. And then again going to reach that point of singularity. And again, there's going to be another one. And it's also possible that it's not, again, happening in just in one place. So simultaneously, in this, it's even so difficult to even contemplate this, that simultaneously in this vastness of the universe, there may be these big bangs going about a lot of places. Swamiji actually mentioned this in another one of his talks, I believe, that when we speak about Srishti, Sthiti, and Pralaya, that the world is projected, it stays for a while, and then it then it returns to its source. And then in the next cycle, it comes out again. Yatha purvam akalpayat, as it was, as in the previous cycles. So kind of it goes. Swamiji says that even this we don't have to think that it was just in one place, that this whole universe. Simultaneously, in some places, a srishti will be going on. In some other place in the universe, there is sthiti, and then some other place, there is a destruction. So this thing should not be seen as just one thing happening in one place. The universe is just too big that simultaneously this creation, preservation, and destruction at different stages may be happening in different places. Because sometimes one of the questions that often gets asked is, if some souls are getting liberated, why is the population increasing? It's not that difficult to respond to that, and there are many different ways of responding to it. But at least one simple way is that it's our idea of population is so narrow to the point of being silly. First of all, when we speak about population, we're just thinking about human beings. None of us has taken a what do you call that when you count the number of people? Census. Yeah, so we just take census of human beings. We haven't taken a census of animals, microscopic creatures, even germs and bacteria. Each of them has a jiva inside. So none of us had a census of that. And then we are this miserable little planet that we have in this small little galaxy. And there are infinite number of galaxies and infinite number of universes. So that should not be a question anymore of why the population is increasing when people are getting liberated, because that really doesn't make sense. And there are, of course, other ways of addressing that as well. So what Swamiji is pointing out here is we need to think about creation in a little bit different way. These things might be good for children to say, oh, God is sitting there in heaven, and then God said, I'm going to make this world. In 7 days, God made the world, then God rested, which might satisfy us at some stage in life. But then as we grow older, we either might just laugh it off and say, oh, these are all just stories, not true. But then if that's not true, then we must have some alternative ways of thinking about it. And Swamiji is here at least providing an idea about how the Hindus have thought about it. And next, Swamiji will go to the discussion of the Atman. But we'll pause here now and think a little bit about creation. So what do you think about this idea that this world doesn't have a beginning, that the creation and creator are two parallel tracks? What do you think about that? Yes.
So Swamiji, from some of your other lectures, we've talked a lot about the difference between what something really is and what something apparently is. So when I think of the parallel lines, to me it seems that apparently there's this creation line, but really there's only the God line. So I'm a bit confused as how can there be some creation line really catching up with what we truly believe is the Atman or the sort of God?
Is Atman the creator? That would be the question. So when we say creator and creation are two parallel lines, are we really talking about the Atman and creation or creator and creation? So can the Atman be equated with the creator? That would be one question to consider. Any other thoughts? Yes.
So, only thing that we know is real is Brahman.
How do you know? You met Brahman?
That's the
No, only from books we know.
yes.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
That we read, and that's what I
Right,
say.
right, okay.
Anything else, even the parallel line that goes parallel to Brahman or the creator, is not real.
So Brahman is the creator.
Brahman is the creator, but the parallel line that goes with the Brahman's line, that line is not real.
Is Brahman a line?
Brahman represents the line.
If Brahman is everything, if Brahman is all that exists,
Yeah.
then Brahman cannot be only the creator. Brahman will have to be the creation as well, right?
Okay, Brahman, but the creation, but then you have two reality.
Okay, okay, good point. So think about it this way. The creation depends on the creator, right? If there is no creator, there is no creation. But doesn't the creator also depend on creation? If there is no creation, then there is no creator. It's a little bit like sometimes they tell the story of a little boy who had to go and testify in court. He was only 5 years old. And he was a smart kid. He was the only child of his parents. And so the judge asked him, "Oh, what's your name?" Then he told his name. And he was asked, "What is your age?" And he said, "I'm 5 years old." And then he was said, "Well, how old are your parents?" And he said, "They are 5 years old." Then everyone laughed. I said, "Ridiculous. If you are 5 years old, how can your parents be 5 years old?" And then he said, "Before I was born, they were not parents." So, at least for the firstborn in a family, the parents are as old as their child. I mean, the people existed, but they did not exist as parents. They became parents only after the birth of the child. In a similar way, God can exist. God is eternal, no doubt about it. But is God a creator before creation? If there was no creation, there was God, but there was no creator.
Okay, the creation is the consciousness of Brahman.
No. Let's stick to this first.
Yeah.
So do you now agree that just as the creation depends on the creator also depends on the creation? That is why they are parallel lines.
Okay.
They are mutually dependent. They can never, creator, just like the two parallel lines will never meet, never intersect, a creator will never be a creation. And that which is creation can never be a creator. They'll never meet. So that's why they are parallel. They are without beginning, and because they are without beginning, they'll be without end, because that which has a beginning will have an end. So, what does it mean when Swamiji says creation is without beginning? And so, if creation is without beginning, then it will never end. And if it will never end, how can there be moksha? How can we be free? And so the idea here is that creation and creator both are real, both are parallel lines, but that is a lower level of reality. And in that lower level of reality, they are beginningless and endless. Now, they are beginningless not technically in the sense of that it doesn't have a beginning, but in the sense that you don't know when it began. Let us give an example. So when I go to sleep and when I start seeing a dream, and let's say I go hiking in my dream, and then I see a mountain there, and if I'm a geologist or something, and somebody, how old this mountain must be, or how old these rocks are. And we're either going to give some random number, could be a few million years old, or that, all that we could say is, I don't know. Or we could say, well, this mountain has always been here. So clearly, all mountains had a beginning, all oceans had a beginning at some point, but because they have been around for such a long time, we just say, oh, they're always there. We see, in our lifetime, we see people coming and going. So it is a little bit easy to understand the mortality of human beings. But in our lifetime, none of us ever seen a kind of a natural destruction of a mountain or an ocean. So when we are born, and if we see a mountain or an ocean, that's pretty much going to be there until we die. We can be sure about it. And so when we say the world is without beginning, the creation is without beginning, it is in the sense of we really don't know when it began. And that is why it is not really beginningless. It is just the idea that we don't know. It's been for a long time. So it's beginningless only in a relative way. But my whole dream world, I may not be able to say when it started. In the dream, I will not even know when these mountains and oceans will come to an end. But we know that when I wake up, everything ends. So when the creation ends, the creatorship of the creator also ends. Just as when I go to sleep and I start seeing the dream, who is creating that dream? I'm creating that dream. And I'm the only one who is perceiving it. My dream is my dream. Next day I might narrate that dream to somebody else. But no two people can share a same dream. My dream is my own personal dream. And I'm the creator of that dream. Everything in that dream is projected out of my mind. So I'm the creator. And then there is this dream, that is the creation. When I wake up in the morning, the creation is gone. And the creator is gone too. Because if the creation doesn't exist, the creator doesn't exist. It's like if there is no kingdom, then there is no king. I mean, although now sometimes people who no longer have kingdom, you might still out of courtesy refer to them as His Royal Highness. And sometimes in India, after the British left and all the kingdoms were reabsorbed into the Republic, there were really no real kings. And yet, the people who were part of the royal family, at least those close circles, used to refer to them as a king. I remember years ago when I joined the monastery, so there was one very elderly lady. She used to come to our ashrama in Bombay. And so she came from a family which was not like a huge kingdom, a small little kingdom in Maharashtra somewhere. And it was not a very big and wealthy kingdom. And of course, after India became free, it all became part of the Indian Republic. And I believe for some time they were given a kind of a pension, royal pension from the government. And I think sometime in the 60s, that was also stopped. And so this lady who was getting this very meager little pension from the government because being part of the royal family was really financially not at all affluent. And so sometimes she would come to the ashrama, and she was very devoted, and she knew many of the swamis and others. So sometimes the swamis will jokingly say, "Oh, here the princess has come," and she would say, was the only government communication, the letters would come to her addressed as HH, Her Highness. But she said, sometimes I don't have money to pay for my rent. Next. So I'm just mentioning this to show that a king without a kingdom is no king. So a creator without creation is no creator. And so that's the idea here. So from the perspective of the waking world, the dream world has a beginning and has an end. But from the perspective of the dream world itself, you don't know when it began, and you have no idea when it is going to end. So that is how these two ideas about the creation being beginningless and endless, and also it ending, are both harmonized. Because in Hindu philosophy, they recognize what could be called levels of reality. The Sanskrit word for levels of reality is called satta. Sat. When you say Sat Chit Ananda, that's Sat, existence. So, what are the three levels of reality? So they say there are three levels. One level of reality is called, well, the reality in which all this now, this discussion that is going on, and we are sitting and exchanging ideas and thoughts, and all of this is real. So this in Sanskrit, this is called Vyavaharika Satta. Vyavaharika Satta means relative reality, that all of this is real, but only relatively real. Now there's another kind of reality which is called Paramarthika Satta, the absolute reality. Now in that level, Brahman alone exists. There is no duality, everything is one. So you come down a little bit, there is this relative reality. Now there is one more reality, and that is called in Sanskrit Pratibhasika Satta. And we might translate that as apparent reality. So dreams. Now, as long as we are dreaming, it all appears very real. But somehow, the reality of the waking world appears to be a little bit different category than the reality of the dream world. Which is why it's easy to laugh off dream. No matter how terrible a dream it is, no matter how absurd it is, you can, while you're dreaming, of course, we may be affected by it. But when you wake up in the morning, you just say, oh, that was just a dream. You can laugh it off. You know, it's not real. But it's not so easy to laugh off things that are happening in this waking world. Because every morning we wake up with the same world. So this relative reality has more stability than the apparent reality. The rope that is mistaken for a snake, and as long as I'm seeing the snake, that snake is real. But that snake vanishes when I see the rope. So the reality of that snake is apparent reality. The apparent. Sometimes when you go in a desert area or very sandy area, sometimes there's an illusion of water. You kind of you feel there is water by the optical illusion and the reflection of the rays. A kind of a false sense that there is an oasis somewhere. That is also an apparent reality. Rope and snake analogy, of course, we have mentioned. The dream is an apparent reality. So there are these three levels of reality. And the only difference between apparent reality and the relative reality is that the relative reality has a little bit more stability. It doesn't vanish as quickly as this apparent reality. And then, of course, but even relative reality will end when we reach that stage of absolute reality, that is Paramarthika Satta. And that is why Swami Vivekananda said that we travel not from error to truth, but we travel from truth to truth, from a truth that is lower to a truth that is higher. And so that is a good way to look at it. And because Hindu philosophy accepts these levels of reality, it's possible to accommodate a world that is seemingly beginningless and endless with a world that begins and ends, with the reality where the world doesn't exist at all. All of these apparently mutually contradictory ideas can coexist because this idea of the levels of reality. And in that sense, what Ramakrishna told Narendranath when he first visited him as a college student now begins to make greater sense. We know that as a college kid, Vivekananda, Narendranath as his name was, went and met many religious leaders of his time. And he would ask them, have you seen God? And no one could give him a direct, confident answer, unambiguous answer. People told theories, people quoted from books. It is only Ramakrishna who said, yes, I have seen God. But he said something more. The first sentence itself is not very stopped. He said, yes, I have seen God. And then he says, I see God more clearly than I see you. So that is what is meant by that the reality of God is of a higher reality than the reality of this world. So just as when we wake up in the morning and we encounter this reality, immediately, just a few minutes before, when we were in the dream world, that dream world appeared very real. But that reality suddenly gets dismissed when I become aware of the waking world, which is more real. And then I can say, oh, that was only a dream. In the same way, when I realize God, when I know that truth, when I realize I am Brahman, I will encounter a higher reality. And from that perspective, what we are seeing now, which is appearing very real now, will appear as a dream. So we are going from one dream to another dream. And the goal of life is to find that state where there is no more dreaming. Because dreams come and go, but the real, the one who is perceiving, the witness of the dream alone stays. So that's the way creation, as it is understood in Vedanta, that it seemingly has a beginning and an end. In one level, we have no idea when it started, and these apparently mutually contradictory ideas are held together by this idea of the different levels of reality. So what do you think? Does this make sense, or what questions you have? Yes, Johnny?
it looks like in physics that the system, it depends on the observer. So if I perceive myself as like a finite being, probably even my universe will be finite. If instead I realize that I'm not finite, there is no reason why the universe should be. So like it really depends on the observer, because
Yep. And also, that's a good point. Also, only if I am finite, then there will be some space for me to see something outside. So if I'm infinite, I can't see anything, because seeing is objectification. And if I'm infinite, there can be no object, because an object would limit me. And so if I'm infinite, there is no seeing. In fact, in the Upanishad, there are passages which says that once you attain that non-dual identity, who will see whom? Who will talk to whom? There isn't a second being. There is just oneness. Yep, that's it. Yeah. Any other ideas? Yes, Anish? Yeah.
So, Swami, just some thoughts. So the Vedantic perspective is very subjective. So it looks at it from, subjectively, has creation occurred or not occurred? But then, if you look at it objectively, which is, I think, what Swami Vivekananda was starting to discuss in his talk, so we don't know necessarily what the real physical laws of the universe are. We don't know enough about that. But if you assume what you had mentioned, I think earlier, that there's a total, sum total of energy in the universe. Some of it is potential, and some of it's kinetic or actual. And so, I mean, that makes sense to me. That there is no. If God is part of that, like a creator and a universe that's created, then the sum total is all God. Everything is God. Anyway, just a thought is that the Samkhyas, they talk about the material, the Prakriti, where it's like the energy. So I can imagine that, I can understand how that can be just a mass of energy. But then the consciousness part of it, there's the consciousness part of it as well. Who knows? Maybe there's a sum total of consciousness, in that view. There could be a sum total, objectively speaking, there could be a sum total of matter and energy. And then there could also be a sum total of consciousness. I'm just kind of speculating.
Yep. It's a good way of thinking. And that point you noted was very true. That the Vedantic approach is very subjective, because, and this may not be so obvious in the beginning, but we might speak about the objective world and the objective universe. And that kind of thinking comes because it's somehow ingrained in our thinking that the objective world has an existence independent of me. And the Vedantic approach is, no, everything is dependent upon me. Now that me can be understood in an egoistic sense, and then that's not really what is intended. What is meant is that let's see, I have to go to that example of dream, because that's the only way it kind of makes it very clear. And that is, on whom is the dream dependent? The entire dream world depends on me. The dream. Now, okay, let's put it this way. A prerequisite for knowledge is consciousness. In order for me to know something, I must be conscious of it. Because if I'm not conscious of it, I will not know it. If a tree falls in some forest and I have neither seen it or heard it or I don't know, and no one has seen it, how do you know it has fallen? So, my dream starts when I become conscious of it. My dream ends when I'm no longer conscious of it. When I become conscious of the waking world, my consciousness from the dream world is withdrawn. Now, do we believe that, oh, I have woken up, I am not conscious of that dream world, but the dream world is still continuing? Or do I believe that after I have woken up, the dream world has ended? What do you think? Would you believe that the dream in which you were a part of that big dream that you were seeing at night, when you woke up, does that dream world continue for the other people in that dream? Yes.
So Swamiji, so if you know, just myself as me, if I don't know, getting back to your example of the tree that's fallen, if it's fallen, how do you know? If you don't know that the tree has fallen, then it hasn't happened to you as far as you know. But if you identify yourself with all the consciousness that's in the world, you know, all other animals that might have been near the tree when it had actually happened, then it has happened, but maybe you're not aware of it. But it has, you know, maybe at that moment you're not aware of it because you're identified so closely with yourself. But if you're identified with all of the consciousness in the world, you know, they talk about the cosmic mind and things like that, then it did happen. You know, something was conscious of it.
But what do you mean by identify with all consciousness? We are not identifying with consciousness per se. Our consciousness is able to give us knowledge of the objects. So when I see a tree fall, I'm not identifying with consciousness, but because of my consciousness is focused on that object, I'm able to see the tree fall. So now the phrase identifying with consciousness, because I think consciousness is not an object. Consciousness is always self-consciousness. Because it's only my consciousness that I'm aware of. I'm not even aware of your consciousness, what to speak of a tree's consciousness. So, although we just use the word consciousness, I think it's good to recognize consciousness always means self-consciousness. Consciousness, because it's very subjective. It's like this, if only my consciousness of the chair, I'm completely aware of myself because it's my consciousness. Now, if there's another person who is conscious of it, I don't have a direct knowledge of that person's consciousness. I can only kind of infer, well, that person is a human being, that person is seeing that thing, so obviously that person is conscious, but that's inference. But my consciousness is not a matter of inference. It's there. And so consciousness, therefore, is always self-consciousness.
So maybe where I'm getting confused here, I'm thinking about, you know, when they talk about the Divine Mother, she's this, you know, she's the consciousness in everybody and everything. So, you know, maybe we're not aware of these things happening, but the Divine Mother would be aware of all of these things happening in the world, because she is the consciousness of all of us. And so, you know, that's where I'm kind of getting confused, because I'm thinking, you know, from the Divine Mother's perspective, these things are happening.
Yes, so if you want to bring the Divine Mother into it, then think about it this way. Divine Mother has fallen asleep. And Divine Mother now sees that I'm a human being. And therefore, I have a limited consciousness. And so, yes, Divine Mother has consciousness, but Divine Mother now is because the thing is this, Divine Mother is not someone else. Although it's going to sound very awful, heretical also to say, well, I am the Divine Mother. But that's the idea. I am who I am now because I have forgotten that I am divine. if I know I am that divine, I am no longer this small little being. So that's why it's very subjective. That's the idea. Yeah. Mahendra?
This is not more a question, but I think more I'm relating to the gospel where Ramakrishna, I think one of the devotees asked him and say, what is the, once you attain self-realization, what is there? And he said, there is nothing after that.
No.
And I kind of like now thinking in terms of how Swamiji was talking about it, and it must be related to that, thinking of that Ramakrishna said, once you self-realize yourself, then everything ceases. There's nothing there.
Yes, I mean, if everything becomes one, because all of the things is based on interaction, based on subject-object division. The whole idea of life is nothing but a subject, an object connected with some activity. So here I am reading a book, subject, object, the act of reading connects me with this object. So the entire existence as we are is because of subject-object relationship. And when that subject-object relationship vanishes, the world vanishes. And how do we know that? Actually, we experience it every night. When we are in fast asleep, in deep sleep, there is no subject, I mean, at least the way, I mean, there is in some way, yes, there is ignorance, and so there is a very subtle level, there is a subject-object thing. But we at least have some glimpse of what it means that the entire world as we understand it can disappear when that subject-object relationship goes away. The only objects that do remain, the only object, if you like, can do remain in deep sleep is the awareness of nothingness and of course the joy that we experience. So you sleep well, next morning you wake up and say, oh, I slept so well, I didn't know anything. And you feel happy and say, I slept happily. So I mean, there was a little object, the object of nothingness and the object of joy. So it wasn't total absence of subject-object, but pretty close to it. And so therefore, once that non-dual awareness comes, then because subject-object division will go, and that's why that kind of the highest absorption is called nirvikalpa samadhi. Vikalpa means a difference. Vikalpa means a distinction. And that distinction between subject and object. And when that distinction vanishes, nirvikalpa, no distinction. And therefore, in that state of nirvikalpa samadhi, that's it. There's nothing. You are who you are. That's the idea. Yeah. Yes.
I was wondering, since if I'm the witness to the chair and then the chair exists for me, then shouldn't there be a witness to God so that God exists? That's the question.
Say that. Speak slowly so I'll...
Oh, sorry. I was wondering...
Who is the witness to God because God exists?
Yep.
Yes. Well, you are the witness to God. God is not an object of one's perception. And therefore, you cannot see God the way you see a chair. God is... In fact, you can see God, you can see the chair only because in and through God. God is awareness. God is Chaitanya. And without awareness of the chair, you cannot see the chair. So even to see the chair, you are really seeing the chair through God. And so God itself cannot be seen the way a chair is seen because God cannot be objectified. What to speak of God? You cannot see even your own eyes. With the help of your eyes, you see everything. But you cannot, no one has seen their own eyes. I mean, before a mirror, you can see a reflection, but you cannot see your own eye. And I mean, it's an object, but still, even that which is an object, we cannot see. What to speak about someone who is not an object at all? Yeah.
Swamiji, you mentioned that if there is no creator, so there is no creation. So in the dream world, we create our dream world, we woke up, and then we create this so-called world. So it's like we don't know, because there is dream world is dying with the creator, and this world is dying when I'm going to sleep. So there is nothing.
No, the creator is not dying. The creatorship of the person has gone.
So in the dream world, I am the creator of my dream.
No. You means the sleeping you
Yes.
is creating the dream world.
Right.
And because of that, but in the dream you will be there, but that person, you, in the dream has not created that dream world.
So dream,
The dream world is created by you, the sleeping you. Because there are actually two people involved there. I am sleeping, and in my dream I see myself doing a bunch of things. So there are two of me, the sleeping me and the dream person me. So that dream person me has not created the dream world. The sleeping me has created the dream world.
and then waking me
So,
is,
I mean, in the dream sometimes, that me inside the dream will sleep and wake up, but the dream will continue. The sleeping me has to wake up for that dream to go. So there are really two of us. All right. Yes, Vivek.
I mean, going back to this, what was brought up a little bit earlier, and you had mentioned the example of the eyes. So just take eyes to mean any way we get information. So the universe is the subject, the object, the eyes are the subject. But without the mind, the eyes don't function. So the mind is the subject. The eyes are the object, but the mind of my 5-year-old self and who I am today, there's something else that was aware that I'm still that same person, but I can't see that observer. If I'm able to see it, wouldn't that resolve who is aware of the mind?
Yep, that's true. It's just consciousness. In fact, there is a text called Drik Drishya Viveka, the distinction between the seer and the seen. And that goes through these steps that you are referring to. That when I'm reading a book, I am the perceiver, the book is an object. But then the I is the perceiver and this thing, and then the optic nerve, and then you can go back the mind, and then the intellect. So the subject-object thing kind of keeps on changing until you go back to the source. And so the entire subject-object relationships is a part of this vast creation. And as long as that subject-object distinction remains, creation will remain. When that distinction will totally go away, creation will totally end. And that's why in the Taittiriya Upanishad, Udaram antaram kurute atatasya bhayam bhavati. Udaram antaram kurute. If I separate myself from this objects, even a little bit, then I'm still a part of the samsara. I'm still a part of the universe. Atatasya bhayam bhavati. So fear is generated. Now fear not in a very gross sense. The idea is all of the existential human trauma that we are passing through, all of that will be there even if I separate myself out from the object, even by a little. So that distinction has to completely go. And that's how it is. So this is a very kind of a non-dualistic approach to things. So we'll stop here today, and as we go forward, we'll have more opportunities to reflect on this more. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. On Sunday, for satsang, our subject will be meditation on the elements. Next Wednesday, we will not have this discussion of Swamiji's lectures. We have a guest Swami visiting, Swami Dhyanananda, who is a assistant Swami at the Vedanta Society of Sacramento in California. He is visiting and he'll give a talk on spiritual approach to suffering. I think it will be a very interesting presentation. So I would encourage all of you, next Wednesday at 7:30, Spiritual Approach to Suffering by Swami Dhyanananda. And I'll request him to keep some time for question answers as well. So you'll have time to speak with him. And on Tuesday and Saturday, our Arati and meditation will continue as usual. So let's conclude with a prayer now on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.